You know, what's interesting about you both now is you have a connective thread, one of the most transcendent players in the history of women's basketball, and Caitlin Clark. And it's her birthday today. You guys both shouted her out.
Yes.
So, Drew and Aaliyah. Yeah, you can see.
On the right-hand side of your screen from Coach, and then Aaliyah doing a mashup of pictures, which is really sweet.
Lisa Bluder just dropped some real talk about what it was actually like having Caitlin Clark on her team. And honestly, her response hits way deeper than you'd expect. The Iowa coaching legend kept it completely honest. She got into the intensity, the madness, and all those behind closed doors moments that never made it to the cameras. This whole discussion shows us a completely different angle on the Clark phenomenon that fans have never heard before, and it's genuinely captivating. Jump in the comments right now and let me know, should Lisa Bluder be getting way more recognition for molding Caitlin Clark into the phenomenon she turned into, or was Clark already destined for greatness, regardless of who coached her?
I love this for you guys because you guys are both still really close. Obviously, Aaliyah as a current teammate, but how close are you still, Coach, to Caitlin?
Oh, I talk to her quite often. You know, I follow all of her successes and everything. I just always want to be in her camp and support her. I have so much admiration for her, for what she has really not only just accomplished, but what she's handled in her young 24 years of.
All right, so Lisa Bluder recently had this conversation where she completely opened up about the reality of having Caitlin Clark on her roster at Iowa. And I'm telling you, this wasn't some cookie cutter she was amazing to work with garbage that coaches typically throw out there. Bluder actually delivered some real substance, some genuine perspective on what that whole journey was actually like. And honestly, it's way more intense than anyone realizes. Let me paint the picture for you here. Bluder was Clark's coach for 4 complete years at Iowa, spanning 2020 through 2024. During that stretch, Clark transformed into the most discussed player in the entire history of women's college basketball. She shattered scoring records left and right, she packed arenas to capacity. She elevated Iowa basketball to heights that seemed impossible before her arrival. And throughout that entire whirlwind, Bluder was right there in the middle of it all, trying to manage what was essentially a 3-ring circus.
I told her today, your 20s have been pretty good to you.
I would say so. Yeah, they've been transformative, I would say, to say.
During this recent interview, Bluder mentioned how she keeps regular contact with Clark. She explained that they communicate frequently and she follows every single one of her achievements, which honestly sounds like typical coach speak. But then she dropped something really compelling. She described having tremendous respect for Clark, not just because of her accomplishments, but because of everything she's navigated during her brief 24 years on this planet. That phrase right there is everything. Everything she's navigated. Because having Caitlin Clark on your team wasn't simply about basketball strategy. It was about handling a complete media explosion. It meant dealing with attention levels that had never been seen before, constant criticism, intense examination, and relentless pressure. And Bluder experienced every single moment of that firsthand. Bluder even made a joke with Clark on her birthday, saying your 20s have treated you incredibly well, which honestly might be the biggest understatement ever recorded. Clark's 20s have been completely off the charts. She transformed from unknown college freshman to the most recognizable face in women's basketball across just 4 years. She demolished records that experts believed were untouchable forever. She generated mainstream interest in women's college basketball at levels not seen since the peak Connecticut dynasty years. But here's the part that doesn't get nearly enough attention. While all of this craziness was unfolding, Lisa Bluder was the person actually responsible for coaching her, not just developing her basketball fundamentals, but guiding her growth as both an athlete and individual, while the entire sporting universe was scrutinizing every single decision she made. That goes way beyond normal coaching responsibilities. That's entering completely uncharted territory. Consider everything Bluder was juggling every single day. Every single game was completely sold out. National television crews were constantly following Iowa specifically because of Clark. Opposing coaches were designing entire game plans focused solely on stopping her, sometimes deploying multiple defenders to follow her around the court for entire games. The expectations for Clark to deliver were absolutely enormous. And naturally, the expectations for Bluder to position her for success were equally enormous.
was so happy for Aaliyah when Caitlin went to Indiana because I knew you were going to reap a lot of those passes down the court and she was going to feed you the ball. And I just think you guys are such a dynamic duo.
And it's not like Clark was some bench player who had occasional flashes of brilliance. She was the absolute center of everything Iowa attempted to do on offense. Every single offensive possession flowed directly through her hands. When she struggled, Iowa typically came up short. When she was locked in, they could compete with absolutely anyone. That represents an incredible burden for any college athlete to shoulder, and it creates massive responsibility for any coach to handle effectively. Bluder also had to navigate all the negativity that came Clark's direction, particularly during her final 2 seasons when the spotlight reached its most blinding intensity. Critics were endlessly arguing about whether Clark was getting too much hype, whether she played too selfishly, whether she prioritized individual statistics over team victories. And serving as her coach, Bluder needed to help her work through all that background noise while simultaneously trying to win basketball games and continue developing every other player on the roster. What strikes me most about Bluder's recent comments is how she specifically highlighted respecting how Clark managed everything. That definitely suggests there were stretches where things got really tough. Stretches where the expectations became overwhelming. Stretches where Clark was probably really struggling with all the demands and never-ending attention. And Bluder was present through all of those moments, providing guidance while also attempting to operate an end-to-end basketball program. The dynamic between Bluder and Clark is really unique because it doesn't fit the standard coach-player model. Clark wasn't simply some gifted athlete who needed traditional instruction. She was a once-in-a-generation talent who was completely rewriting history books and fundamentally altering the entire women's college basketball landscape. Bluder needed to discover how to guide someone operating at that level without crushing her natural instincts or restricting her game-changing impact. And truthfully, Bluder handled that challenge almost perfectly. She allowed Clark to remain authentic to herself. She didn't attempt to squeeze her into some inflexible structure that would have completely limited her extraordinary abilities. She constructed the entire offensive system around Clark's unique skill set and gave her complete freedom to create magic on the court. That requires tremendous confidence as any coach, because when things go wrong, you become the target for criticism about giving your superstar too much control. There's also the challenge of keeping the rest of your team engaged while one individual is receiving all the media coverage. Iowa had several other skilled players who made significant contributions to their overall success. Athletes like Monica Chinano, Kate Martin, Gabby Marshall, and Hannah Stuhlke. Bluder needed to ensure those players felt appreciated and essential even though roughly 90% of all media attention focused exclusively on Clark. That requires extremely delicate handling. And from everything we witnessed, she managed that beautifully.
Interesting watching her final season in college with you here at the desk and then watching your relationship develop at the professional level.
Yeah, honestly, it has been so great. It's always so weird when you play against someone and then you are on the same team and building that relationship. But I think just over the past 2 years, it's been amazing. From the first time she got to Indy and us just building that relationship on the court, off the court. Honestly, that's my.
This discussion also explored the connection between Clark and Aaliyah Boston, who now play together professionally with the Indiana Fever. What makes that particularly interesting is how it demonstrates that the relationships Clark developed during college have successfully transitioned into her professional basketball career. Bluder definitely played a significant role in developing Clark into someone capable of building those meaningful connections with teammates, including players she previously competed against during college.
Elite. So when you met up with each other, of course, you got all your college history, but then does it not take too long to recognize, hey, this is somebody that is like-minded like me, skilled like me, and can elevate my game to a level that I haven't seen?
I mean,
You had a
you know that from
fantastic
playing
season last
against
season.
her. You know that from playing against her, just how competitive she is in that nature. And so to be on the same team, it honestly continues to motivate you because you guys want to be great for each other. And I feel like that's how we play. Like every time we step on the floor, we give each other our pregame hugs and, she says, you're going to be amazing because you are amazing. And I say back, but it's just that confidence that Caitlin just continues to make you feel. And then you.
Boston described how Clark constantly encourages her and helps her feel confident whenever they're playing together. That represents a learned skill that Clark developed somewhere along the way. And much of that probably originated from the team culture Bluder established at Iowa. An environment where teammates genuinely supported each other and consistently lifted each other higher. That kind of atmosphere doesn't develop accidentally. that comes from deliberate coaching philosophy and strong leadership. Bluder also had to live with the harsh reality that Iowa never captured a national championship throughout Clark's entire tenure there. They reached the national championship game twice, in both 2023 and 2024, and fell short both times. That must create incredible frustration for any coach. Having the absolute best player in the entire country, potentially the greatest player in women's college basketball history, and being unable to deliver that championship ring, that's something that will probably stay with Bluder forever. Despite the fact that she coached brilliantly and provided Iowa with the best possible opportunity for success. The reality that Iowa couldn't win a title with Clark has generated some criticism directed at Bluder's coaching approach. People have questioned her strategic decisions, her substitution patterns, her ability to make crucial in-game adjustments. And that criticism seems pretty unfair because she was working with the roster available to her and did an amazing job maximizing their collective potential. But that becomes the harsh reality when you're coaching a player like Clark. Everyone's expectations become completely unreasonable, and anything less than a championship gets labeled as complete failure. What's equally interesting is how Bluder decided to retire immediately after Clark graduated. She spent 24 years coaching at Iowa and chose to step away right when the Clark era concluded. That timing definitely wasn't purely coincidental. Coaching Clark was most likely the absolute pinnacle of her entire career, and she recognized that whatever came afterwards couldn't possibly measure up to that experience. So she decided to walk away while still at the peak, or at least as close to the peak as possible, without actually winning that championship. Bluder's observation about Clark's 20s being incredibly successful shows that she completely understands just how extraordinary these past few years have been. Clark recently turned 24, which means her entire adult existence has been completely dominated by basketball superstardom. She became nationally famous at age 20. She started breaking records at 21 and 22. She got selected first overall in the draft and became a professional sensation. And now at 24, she's already established herself as one of the most significant figures in the entire history of women's basketball. That represents an absolutely incredible journey, and Bluder was there guiding the college portion of that ride. The dynamic between any coach and a generational talent always creates fascinating storylines because both individuals depend on each other in completely different ways. Clark needed Bluder to provide the framework and guidance necessary to develop into the player she ultimately became. And Bluder needed Clark to transform her program and establish her permanent legacy as one of the most successful coaches in women's college basketball history. It created a relationship that benefited everyone involved, but that definitely doesn't mean it was simple or easy. Bluder probably experienced moments where she felt completely exhausted by the relentless attention and constant pressure. Moments where she wished she could simply focus on coaching basketball without having every single decision analyzed by national media outlets. Moments where she questioned whether all the chaos surrounding Clark was actually worth the headaches. But then Clark would go out and score 40 points in spectacular fashion and make every challenge completely worthwhile. What's also important to recognize is that Bluder guided Clark through some absolutely heartbreaking moments. That 2023 national championship loss to LSU was devastating. The 2024 defeat against South Carolina felt even worse because it represented Iowa's final opportunity with Clark on the roster. Bluder needed to help Clark work through those crushing defeats and find ways to move forward, which becomes incredibly difficult when the entire basketball universe is watching and waiting to see how she bounces back. The respect Bluder expressed for how Clark handled every challenge suggests there were definitely moments where everything could have completely fallen apart. Moments where the intense pressure could have destroyed her confidence. Moments where she could have completely crumbled under the massive weight of everyone's expectations, but she never did. And much of that resilience probably stems from the support structure Bluder created throughout her time at Iowa. Bluder also needed to address all the criticisms surrounding Clark's individual playing style. Critics claimed she dominated the ball too much. They argued she didn't elevate her teammates' performances. They suggested she cared more about personal statistics than team success. As her coach, Bluder had to defend her in public settings while potentially having some of those difficult conversations with her during private moments. That creates a really challenging situation, because you want to support your player completely, but you also need to remain honest about specific areas where improvement is possible. The fact that Bluder maintains regular communication with Clark demonstrates that their relationship successfully survived the intense pressure of those 4 years together. Many coach-player relationships naturally fade when the competition ends, but Bluder and Clark clearly developed something much deeper and more meaningful. They experienced something completely unique together, something that nobody else will ever fully comprehend or appreciate. And that shared experience created a lasting connection that has continued well beyond their Iowa days. When you look back at everything now, Bluder's experience coaching Clark was probably the most challenging and fulfilling period of her entire career. She coached an athlete who fundamentally changed the game and generated completely unprecedented attention for women's college basketball. She helped develop someone who evolved into a genuine cultural phenomenon, not simply another basketball player, and she accomplished all of this while handling more pressure and public scrutiny than most college coaches ever experience in their entire careers. This conversation also demonstrated how Clark continues to positively influence everyone around her, even after moving on from Iowa. Aaliyah Boston talked about how Clark makes her feel confident and incredible every single time they step onto the court together. That reflects the type of person Clark has become, and much of that character development happened during her years with Bluder at Iowa. Bluder's comments weren't overly dramatic or sentimental, which actually makes them significantly more impactful. She didn't get emotional or go on and on about how special Clark was as a player. She simply acknowledged the complex reality of what coaching her actually involved, expressing admiration for everything she achieved and everything she successfully handled. That restrained approach speaks volumes about just how complicated that entire coaching relationship really was. When everything is said and done, Lisa Bluder coached the most famous women's college basketball player of this entire generation and played a crucial role in helping her develop into everything she represents today. That creates a legacy that will define Bluder for the rest of her life. And based on everything she's shared, it seems like she feels genuinely proud of what they accomplished together, even though that elusive national championship never materialized. So that's the complete picture. Lisa Bluder shared her honest perspective about coaching Caitlin Clark, and her insights reveal just how complex and demanding that entire experience truly was. If you're interested in more detailed analysis of women's basketball stories that go beyond surface-level coverage, hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts on what Bluder's most significant contribution to Clark's development actually was.